This is our Powerhouse Pioneras panel. And if you don't know what pioneras means in Spanish, which I think most people here do, but it means pioneer. And as we were crafting this specific session, there are no two women who I think of immediately than these two incredible leyendas that are on stage with me, Laura Catena and Lynette Marrero. Round of applause, please. And the amount of hats that they wear, I could never do it justice. So I'm going to have each of them share a little bit about what they do. Buenos días, Laura.
Buenos días. Great to be here. And Gabrielle and I did this really fun podcast, so I was so excited when you invited me to speak. I just arrived from Mexico last night. Had an amazing time there. They love wine.
They do love wine.
In Mexico. And I work for my family winery, Catena Zapata in Argentina, which was founded by my great-grandfather, who was Italian, in 1902. And the first part of my career was medicine, but kind of quickly I started doing both medicine and working for a family winery. Now I'm managing director. And some of the things that I'm really passionate about is biodiversity. We have extraordinary genetic diversity of vines, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, many other varieties in Argentina, which they don't have in Europe, and nobody knows about this. So this is one of my big topics that I'm talking about. There's an article in Decanter magazine about it. I'm a big fan of sort of getting rid of this whole old world, new world thing, where somehow old world is always better. And so that's something that I'm passionate about as well. And then a new thing is I feel like I was sent to med school to be in this world right now because there's all this misinformation going around about alcohol and health. And there's, fanatics, prohibitionists trying to, deny that there's, some health benefits. There's also some harms from alcohol that we all know about. But the language around it is not scientifically correct. So I've actually created a website called indefenseofwine.com, where I put all the articles I've written. I've written articles to New York Times, Wall Street Journal, when they print misinformation. And so if you want to read what is the real data about alcohol and health, it's all there, indefenseofwine.com.
And if there's somebody who loves data, it's definitely you.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lynette. I am based in New York. My journey to spirits and hospitality, actually, my first job ever was in a wine bar with a global spirits list, and I was the begrudging actor, never wanted to be a waiter, and then 9/11 happened, and I ended up in restaurants. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I got it. Let's go. And never turned back because I found this beauty in hospitality and this art form and this art world in the hospitality scene. I was fortunate enough to kind of be in New York at the time when craft cocktails were really pushing forward. And it was, a big moment for people to say, I'm going to work harder, shake with big ice, put my body through crazy physical abuse, and make less money, but I cared about my craft. And so that was the craft cocktail scene at the time, as we were all trying to learn and find, get access to all these spirits and things that we're reading in books that just weren't available yet because people were like, the U.S. doesn't deserve our cool liqueurs, they don't get it. And so we petitioned and wrote and really worked very much across the pond with our allies in London and things to get things over, and many ambassadors would come through and I would meet them, and that's where we kind of, I learned a lot about marketing and a lot about what it took to grow brands from those people who were coming in at the time. I then started moving into restaurant bars where I really found my home. I love to cook, Latinos, we love food. To me, there was always the connection of there's a bigger part of this. How do you choreograph a meal for somebody where you start with the cocktail, moving them into the next round of beverages to wine, then bring them back? So I found a really happy place there, and my mission became to kind of elevate cocktails in restaurants. At that time, especially when I started, it was the big struggle. The chefs were like, oh yeah, we want you to make all the profit for us up there, but we don't want anyone to see you or know you or be who you are. And I'm kind of someone who's, hi, here I am, and do my thing. And so I started working to find the right chefs and allies that would embrace the bar and make it a very cohesive, symbiotic relationship. And I found a lot of that mostly was actually in my time in bars and restaurants that had our culture represented. So I spent 6.5 years working in Peruvian restaurants, kind of how I alluded to yesterday. That was a space where the cuisine was coming up, but no one knew how to pair anything with it. So guests coming in were willing to try anything we put in front of them. So the amount of pisco I was able to sell to a bunch of people, they're like, wow, what is this? I'm like, don't worry about it, you're gonna love it. And they would have it in things where I would embrace classic cocktails to share that. So basically taking pisco and reposado tequila and putting that into an into a Vesper style build. And that became the most popular cocktail. So there's kind of those kind of things that I learned. That led me to I always wore a lot of different hats. I tried for a couple years as a full-time brand ambassador. I preferred to be more on the side where I could have a different style of relationship with with brands. So I stayed working as a champion for some brands, but not a full-time. So brands that I work with, I look towards the people that are there. I've worked with Zacaparram for many, many years because of Lorena Vasquez and her intelligence and what she brings to the rum world. So I kind of directed that passion towards brand advocacy, towards the people that I wanted to be aligned with. And then that kind of led me to a lot of crazy things. I have a masterclass class on masterclass.com for cocktails, and that opened a lot of opportunities for me during the pandemic. One was launching a non-alc spirits company with functional spirits called Aplos, but also having the opportunity to create and partner with Jennifer Lopez on the Lola cocktails. So bringing, again, a kind of a different voice and a different mindset to how cocktails can be, and bringing them in a better for you kind of way with lower sugar and more premium ingredients in a ready to drink way. So I call myself like the portfolio person, because for a long time in the beginning, everyone's like, but you can't do that and that and that and that. You have to be in one place and do one thing. And that was kind of not it. And then I guess another big one of Speed Rack is another big thing that started 13 years ago, which I'm like, and all of that, which is a platform that I started with my partner, Ivy Mix, to elevate women within the bar industry. We've gone global. We're going back global again. We just completed our 4th year in Mexico. And so the idea of kind of sharing it and that platform, it's really, we have kept it going for 13 years because there seems to always be this cycle of needing to remind everyone that women are completely badass. And we're like, hey, just reminding you. And so there's times where you feel like the culture goes back to wanting to be very traditional, masculine, arm garters. And it's usually when cocktail culture's starting in places, they're like, oh, well, this is what these guys look in this book, so that must be the perfect bartender. And we're like, oh, hi, we have to remind you again that, the more your community and your bar reflects the community outside, and that means that you're inviting everyone to be a part of that. And so you can't exclude groups from being a part. So I think that's all I do right now.
Many, many hats, and I think all the females in here are very good at multitasking, just like these ladies. It's what we tend to do. But both of you touched on something that I also really wanted to highlight, and you kind of finished off with that, Lynette. Women are badass, and, we represent now almost 47% of the workforce in the United States, and so we are powerhouses. Even then, as we have these two incredible Latinas sitting on stage who are both executives in their own roles and in their own brands, there's only 1% of C-suite level Latinas in those positions when we're thinking about globally. Again, 47% of the workforce and 1% of those being Latinas in those high positions. So to have the both of you on stage is incredible, but even more so for everything that you've been able to accomplish and how you both continue to give back into the community. I think that's really, really the magic and where the power lies. You started touching on challenges though, right? And obviously being in a male-dominated industry, wine is as well. How have you both navigated, I guess I would even say, the stereotypes that come with being a woman in a male-dominated beverage industry for both wine and spirits?
I mean, it's just the way it is, right? every industry, kind of when you start knocking on the door, you're like, why? I want more access. And I think the way to keep breaking those barriers and bringing is by looking across and bringing people with you, right? It's not enough to be the one person. You look around, you're like, okay, I'm here at this seat, but why aren't there more people who look like me at the seat? So I've seen a lot with like mentorship, and it's been great. I see this community. The Latina community really wants to work together, and that's been with a few organizations I work with, the Latinx House, and I'm seeing across industries that we have great opportunities to elevate each other. So almost it's looking outside of what you're doing and finding all those people out there who will bring you in. At the grassroots of our industry, there's still some places where it gets pretty scary to go into. The distributor level definitely is stuck in old systems and old ways, and I think you can kind of see it if you're a new brand trying to break in. Those systems still are meant to push anyone out. It's really hard to be independent, and that takes a lot of questioning the power. Why? You're like, listen, we are a buying power. We over-index on our brands and our culture, and we double down. And when you show them that that's important, you say, look, women and Latinos are huge buying power. Like if you really look at who's buying spirits, wine, pushing a lot of culture, those are the two demographics that over-index constantly, and they support the people who are from their communities. So that's powerful. So when you go through those rooms, you just kind of question it and say, well, I should be here, and there should be more people who look like me here because we have the strength, we have the power, we understand. I think when Alicia was talking about, bringing that expertise into those places, a lot of, traditional marketing will want to go one way, and you always should feel empowered to question it, especially when we come from the community and say, why are you looking at us as this monolith? We're not a monolith, right? We come from many different cultures, many different backgrounds, and the diversity within our community is so vast, and there's so many ways to approach. And if you only think of one way, that's been the classic way. That's not going to really work anymore. So that's where I look at just kind of taking those barriers down, and just the more you're there, the more they can't deny you. I think if I look at like what the Speed Rack Army has done, it's just to be out and present and work with other folks to bring more people into the community, to say that you have a foundation, and always leaning on your teammates, your crew, whoever your people are. I have my own little coven that I text every day of powerful people who are like, yeah, let's push each other up, and let's ask the questions, and let's be vulnerable with each other, because I think when you have those systems around you, that's really helpful to moving up.
Beautiful.
Well, I was born to a wine family and had no intention of ever working in the family winery because I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people, and I thought, my dad has a wine business, and business people are bad. That was my idea. Now I'd love to make money because I can do good things. When I make money, I can pay better salaries. I can plant beautiful vineyards. And today I really think that through wine, which it gives joy, which in moderation can have some health benefits. I really think I'm helping more people. So the economy of Argentina, everybody that works in wine. I'm a great fan of a responsible business. I think you can do so much good in any job. So I started in medicine, where there's more, today there's more women doctors than men graduating. I went to school here in the US. And so when I went into wine, I was not coming from a place where there were more men than women. I was very comfortable being a woman boss because there's so many, women bosses. And I'm also an emergency physician. So, you're in a position of very high power, and you have to be very, very careful with that power because, everybody is so scared in the emergency department. So, and then I was born into this wine family, and, I started working with my dad to help him out. He had this idea of making Argentine wine that can stand with the best of the world. Nobody knew Argentine wine. And again, I wanted to help him, help my country, and that's how I got involved. So, despite wine being so many men and it being so male dominant when I started, I didn't feel this as much. Also, my father had, his mother was the headmistress of the local school, and she was this really powerful woman. I'm sure many of you have very powerful, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and she had been a real inspiration to my dad. And so it was very natural for him that his daughter would have a leadership position. But one of the things that I have found is that men are such a huge part of the equation in terms of women, having a seat at the table. And at our winery, we have many women in leadership positions, and some of that has to do with what you said. When you see that there's a woman boss, you say, hey, I'm going to work for this company because it is possible for me to go up in that company. But what I have found is that one of the most amazing things is a man, and this was the example for my father, who had this very strong mother, who has had a female mentor. That man who has seen, a woman help him out, help him with his career, will be an amazing mentor to women. And so one of the things I tell people is, listen, don't just go looking for women to mentor. Find some men as well, because it's a multi-sex world, and I think that's a really important thing to switch in your brain about how you think about empowering women. And the other thing is, for me, the biggest impediment for women rising in organizations is the fact that men are not allowed to do many of the female positions at home. Or, I once was at the winery and somebody said, oh, I have to go home. It was a man, my child is sick. And somebody asked them, where's your wife? And after that day, I said to everybody at the winery, I said, I want people calling me from their house with children screaming, men, women, and so sometimes I'll have a call on a weekend because we have some deadline, and the guy will be like, hey, there's my kids screaming. Did you hear them? And I'll be like, yes. And I'm so proud of you because they're like, my wife has gone to the gym. I was like, yes. So I really think that, I think we're going to talk more in detail about what are the things that one can do. But I think,
if you want to get started with that, because you've been talking about mentorship a lot, and I would really love to unpack that a little more. I think mentorship is key when it comes to not only celebrating each other, but being able to develop each other, especially because people think that inclusion and creating inclusion, right, and getting people maybe a more diverse workforce, at the moment you have those people in those positions, boom, check it off my list, I did it. But how are you actually actively supporting those individuals once they're in your organization? So can you both just touch more on mentorship? I mean, both of you have left such an indelible mark in your industries, and I'd love for you to also share maybe your own pieces of advice that you've learned along the way to maybe other men or women in this audience who are looking to make their own mark on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, mentorship is crucial to the success of all businesses. And it comes in many forms. To your point, sometimes it's active, sometimes it's passive, and you don't realize that just you doing your thing and being very open about that can be a mentorship and a roadmap for somebody. In our industry, what's been great and what I've seen, especially here in the US, is that there are like these families that happen within our industry, and you can trace everyone back to where it started, where their spark started, and then everyone comes to each other. I think social media has been a wonderful tool for opening up that mentorship globally. So I love seeing where the industry is now, where we can go to global events and meet people, and they're like, oh my goodness, I saw you here and I met you, and then you can have this relationship with people that helps them show where they can be. I think also there is a lot of misunderstanding in mentorship. I always tell people when they really want to go for a mentor that they have to understand how much work they have to put in as well to that relationship. If you will never get what you want out of it, if you're just expecting someone to be like, yeah, here's how you do it, right? Because the path for everyone is completely different. But, I've seen people in this room really take up arms and say, okay, I want to, just show people what's possible. So it's opening up events and inviting people who are not in your normal group, right? So in our industry, in craft, right, craft is kind of that top tier, but if we just stay this little top tier, we're never going to bring more people in. And I think the pandemic really showed us how vulnerable that industry was, because a lot of people at the top tier of craft at that point started finding other roles and jobs. And then, and I've seen this across the world, and we've had a big conversation when we went back to Mexico City with Speedwreck a couple of years ago, because we're like, nobody knows how to make cocktails from scratch anymore. Everyone's like, well, I've got the milk punch 1 and milk punch 2 and this thing here, and I'm like, oh no, I can't ask them for a paloma and they know how to make it balanced. It was really shocking, and I'm like, oh, mentorship needs to come back, right? Because there's a bunch of new people jumping into the industry, and they were just jumping straight to, all these places are highly trafficked, tourism bars, and the roadmap obviously for volume is to make it easy for everybody. But if you don't teach people the foundations, they'll never grow. They'll never become the people who can really truly build a program. So with the Speedwreck platform, we've always focused on classics. And that one year we went to Mexico City, we're like, what happened? Please, next year in the lead up to the next finals, please start teaching more classics. Please drill that and when you go to the regionals, teach everyone the basics, teach them the tools, right? Show them the long math to the answer, because that's what you're going to do. And I think that sort of mentorship is important, really showing people. And I think especially now, the work it takes, we have all these wine makers in here, learning what it's like to harvest, to crush, to do all the things. Even that's not what you're going to be doing. And if you're going to be in marketing, understanding the full process is important to really have to tell the stories that are deeper. And I think that's right now where we have to go, is really find the people who need that next step up, empower them with information, and give them the tools. Don't give them the answers, give them the tools to then find their own way. And we're going to see creativity really grow from that, because that's how things change, right? Otherwise, we'll have the same homogenous menus, wines, if people aren't learning to understand the rules and they completely break the rules.
We love breaking the rules. Laura?
Yeah, so I agree with so much that you said. And in mentorship, one very important thing that also transferred to the workplace, boss, you're the boss of somebody. It's a two-way street. The boss, when somebody really needs you to do something, you have to stop being the boss and do something for the person that works for you. And that's how they respect you as a boss. And the other way too. And in mentorship, usually it's easier to mentor somebody that actually is doing something for you. We're all super busy. Nobody has any time. So if a mentee solves a problem for you, you're going to, contribute more to that relationship. I couldn't agree more. So I want to do something really fun that I thought about this morning with this label, to tell you some of my advice for, how to have so much fun and get so much done and have a great job. Who's seen this label before? Has anybody seen it? So this is the Catena Zapata Malbec Argentino. Is the first label to tell the history of the origins of a wine varietal on a label. And we actually have a new label now that tells the story of the birth of Cabernet that is sold at Total. It's Angelica Zapata, Birth of Cabernet. But this was basically this label transformed what people knew or thought about Malbec. It starts with Eleanor of Aquitaine, who's this famous queen that lived in the 12th century and drank Malbec at her wedding. Then it continues with the immigrants to Argentina, representing my great-grandmother. Then there's phylloxera, this insect that destroyed all the vineyards in Europe. And because of phylloxera, Malbec comes to Argentina. And then the last person is my sister. She has a PhD in history, and she's the one who came up with the idea of telling the story through these four women, following the allegories of the continent, which is the way stories were told before we had phones and TV and all that. So here's my little bit of advice in this whole, is it okay to do this now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Eleanor of Aquitaine, she was this medieval queen who first married a French king who was very boring. She was from the south of France. He was very religious, went to the Crusades, and she managed to figure out a way to divorce him, which was very difficult at that time, and then married a man 10 years younger than her and lived till the age of 83, which in the 12th century was very, very rare. She was this very powerful woman. At that time, basically, you got married and your husband got everything you had, and she managed to still manage her lands in France from England. And so with the first woman, what I want to say to people is be yourself. There's this book by a psychologist, Rogers, that is called Becoming a Person. And the concept of the book is you are who you are. You will be best when you celebrate who you are. Not when, if you're very talkative and people are always like saying, listen more, talk less. Like, yeah, you're going to be able to learn how to listen a little bit better. But you're a talker. Celebrate that, And if you're a great listener, wow, that is a huge asset. Don't let people say, oh, you're so shy. No, you're a great listener. That's amazing. I'm a talker. I love, listeners are, that's like the number one quality that I love because I don't have it. So, so what I'm saying is this woman in the 12th century managed to be herself. We can today, in the 21st century be ourselves. So don't let people tell you to change your core. Now, there's another great book that's called The Charisma Myth that talks about the different kinds of charisma. Read this book. This was recommended to me. I make everybody that works with me read it because it explains to you, depending on your charisma, here's your strength. Try to learn from the other charismas a little bit. So if you're a talker, try to learn to be a better listener, but don't put yourself down, for who you are. You celebrate that. That's your strength. So that's the first woman, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Find the Eleanor of Aquitaine in you. Then the second one is the immigrants. And my sister, the historian, she was inspired by Saint Sebastian, who is, the saint that was, shot at with arrows. And, it's a horrible story, but she wanted to celebrate the immigrant and the immigrant struggle. And the fact that, some people are more recent immigrants, some are more, several generations ago immigrant, but immigrants always struggle. And we need to be very sympathetic to immigrants. And, here, what I want to say is, life is filled with arrows on you. But these are, it's, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That is factual. Every time, nothing good, this is another one of my sayings, nothing good comes out of something good. The best thing you will ever do in your life, or the best things, because we've got this woman who's done the list is a couple hundred amazing things. They often start with something bad. I always say the best work I do is when somebody really pisses me off. And this whole alcohol and health thing that, I'm I was in Jancis Robinson the other day, I'm getting interviewed by everybody. Basically I got so pissed off that there were these prohibitionist people saying unscientific things. And, I'm a doctor and, I should be out there selling wine. But I said, you know what? I cannot let this happen. So, I'm really trying to support the industry and saying the truth about alcohol and health. And so when you get pissed off, you will do your best work. And so remember that. When something bad happens, just remember it's your power. Then we've got phylloxera. This is very important. For both men and women, but maybe a little more for women. I don't know if you've read this book, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, where she talks about how, women need to be, more, speak up more, but they have to be very careful. This pissed me off because they have to be very careful because an aggressive woman is not perceived correctly and how men can be aggressive and it's okay. I was like, why? So what I found, and this is when I started working with my dad. My dad is brilliant. We work so well together, but he doesn't like giving the bad news or doing the tough negotiations. He always has somebody else do it. So when I started working with him, I was like, wow, nobody wants to do this. I can do it. And I always use the principle, you guys, hard on issues, soft on people. That's the number one thing. Never be mean to somebody. And if you are, just apologize immediately. But you can be hard on issues and find your inner phylloxera. If in a business, you are the one who is willing to go do the tough negotiation, that gives you the kind of power that is extraordinary. Man, woman, if you can have that role that you can deliver the bad news and negotiate something difficult. And if you're hard on issues, soft on people, it will be okay. You might not get a win, but you will often get a win. So find the inner phylloxera in you and don't follow this because you're a woman, an aggressive woman, nobody likes them, you have to be a little sheep. No. You don't have to be a little sheep. You just have to be hard on issues, soft on people.
Somos leonesas.
Leonesas, sí, exactamente. And then, the last one is my sister. She's the historian. And again, like, celebrate yourself. Like, everybody's amazing. Every person on this earth is an amazing being. Every plant on this earth. I mean, this extends to nature. This is why we need to, support the earth and be sustainable and not destroy everything like we humans have done. Because our earth is so beautiful and we are beautiful. And we just need to celebrate that. That's the last woman. Celebrate.
That is incredible advice. I also now have a list of books I need to go read.
We'll send the cliff notes.
But speaking of books, both of you actually have authored books. And so, I mean, again, talk about leaving a mark literally physically, right? That is published, printed, will always be here. You've really been able to push Malbec and Argentine wine because of that. And you've really been able to talk and develop more of the spirit space and like make your mark on that. What is it like to have authored your book, and what was that process like?
It's the worst process ever. I warn everyone, writing a book is the hardest thing I've ever done. But, the time when we decided to do it, it was, again, the middle of the pandemic. Ivy and I had been doing speed rack, and it stopped. And in that stopping time, we had to really think, what do we want to leave? So we built a global mentorship program during that time where we brought our incredible PR team, Foxglove Communications. They're amazing. They really helped us go throughout the world and find women in all different parts of the industry, from food writers to winemakers, not just our own individual experiences in cocktails, because it was really important that our community of speed rackers understood that there was more out there and that they could communicate. So we had this global mentorship program, and we're like, okay, well, that's one thing we're going to do at this time to leave the mark. But we're like, what else? What if, we get out of here, out of this time, and the community's just like, we love speed rack, but we just can't do it right now. It's just a lot, because it's a community effort, and it's a lot of labor of our whole community to make it happen. And so we're like, well, what we at least need to do, leave this in the world so people know what happened and that was here, and that we had women from all over the world come together. And so our book is the Speed Rack Guide to Winning Cocktails for Every Mood. And that came from the idea that we wanted to have contributors from all over the world, which is impossible. If anyone here has ever managed bartenders, getting answers from them, even if you make a Google form and leave all the information, it's like, did you get that email? Did you look at it? We need the recipe. So we had an incredible author who helped us write it, Megan Krigbaum, who comes from, she does a lot of journalism in the industry, and someone else outside of us to fuse our very unique voices into one platform and bring it all together to tell the stories was really important. But what I will say about the book process and what's really important is, when you put something out and you put a pitch, you're going to put it out to many different, publishers. And the most important thing is to go in knowing what your negotiables are and what you're like, no, I will stand for this one thing. And really there, a lot of things was, we live in our little bubble. We're like, yeah, everyone knows what speed rack is. And they're like, no one in the world knows what speed rack is outside of this bubble. And we're like, but speed rack's got to be on there. And so, title was really important. They're like, we need something cute, like a quick drink. We're like, a quick drink's great if we still have the Speed Rack Guide for winning cocktails, so that way people always remember, because that was the idea, was leaving legacy and leaving this little information for people. So you're constantly in the struggle of what they're going to think is marketable versus what your values are. Design is very, very important to me. The best thing that ever happened to my professional career was meeting my partner and marrying him. He's a beautiful, wonderful creative director, and he taught me so much about putting your ideas into visual representations, because you can, and that's helped me with clients over the years. You're like, here's a cocktail menu, and they're like, we don't know what those words mean, but if you can show them a visual, then they're like, oh, we get it. And so the idea of being able to make a deck is really important, and make it look beautiful and communicate your ideas to people who need to see something. So when it came down to design, I would just be constantly looking at it and be like, I hate this. And I was like, babe, how can I say I hate this in a much more nice, subtle way to be softer to people? Because I'm a Scorpio. I'm like, I'm coming out. His Cancer vibe is like, okay, we're going to just say it like this. I'm like, cool. Because I am like not loving this. So you know the things that you're going to stand up for and know what your contract says. So no matter what our contract had, title and naming, we had to fully approve it, and the visual of that we had to approve. So again, go into that knowing that it's going to be that, that it's not going to be this beautiful, you're like in Tuscany writing a book by a beautiful sea. It's going to be a lot of editing, a lot of detail oriented, looking at things, have 3 different people read it because you'll keep catching mistakes. And so anyway, and the last thing you want to do is like, oh no, it was published and chartreuse is spelled with a K. And you're like, chartreuse. And you're like, no. So we caught lots of mistakes, like just mistakes. You do like find it and have someone do that. But it's a difficult process. But if you have something to say and you really want to put it out there, go through the process. Otherwise, it's okay. If you don't really have anything to say, don't worry about it.
You can read it instead.
You can read it instead because it's not for the faint of heart. I see some people out here agreeing. They're like,
Yeah, I agree with everything you said about how it's more difficult than one thinks. And for me, I every time I wrote a book, I tried to find somebody to write it. But then, it's you have a passion for something, and then you just kind of have to do it. And in terms of, I did bring some of my books, but I also believe in illustrations. And this is like our book, Gold in the Vineyards. It's about the most famous vineyards in the world, and there's Chateau Lafite, there's Gigal's La Moline, Antino de Solaya, Harlan, Cadena Zapata, our Adriana Vineyard. But basically, I did an illustrated book because I think most people don't read anymore. So at least you have pretty drawings. But other than the fact that I wanted there to be a book that had Argentina and our best vineyard along with all the other best vineyards in the world, then our winemaker and I wrote this book, Malbec Mon Amour, that has this great cover that is also an illustrated book. And it was, believe me, if it's hard to get something from a bartender, from a winemaker, that's hard too. So I had to basically sit with them and say, talk. And I would transcribe. And then my first book had recipes, and that was one where I went in with an idea, and they said, we don't like your photographer. We're not doing the book with your photographer. And I had to tell my friend that we kind of thought about it together, but I was like, listen, they won't do it with you. And horrible. We're still friends, but there was like a few rocky years in our friendship. And then they said, it has to have recipes. I said, oh, I'm a terrible cook. I'm not like you. I really am. I'm like I know Latinas have this reputation like, oh, you go to my mother's house and she makes you all this food. My kids tell people, don't go to my mother's house, because I am such a bad cook. But then they come for wine, and that's once they're older. Once they're older, they all want to come for wine, but they don't come for the food. And then, so what I did was I got recipes from other wine producers, because I included all these different wineries from Argentina. So there's clever ways. And the final thing is, the one reason to do a book sometimes is you have something to say, and also, you cannot travel the whole world. I travel a lot. We sell wine in China. China is so big, and it's a growing market. They only buy expensive wine, which is, our wine is very high end. It's not that easy to sell $100 bottles of wine, but in China, we can't even keep up with the demand. So I said, how do I penetrate China where they mostly know French wine? So I said, I'm going to do a book in Chinese. So I actually did this book, and I found this amazing, really powerful, the Penguin of China publisher who was interested. But I introduced 3 Chinese wineries who I became best friends with. I spent 2 years studying Chinese wine during the pandemic. A lot of us did stuff that we've been wanting to do our whole life during the pandemic. And so I studied Chinese wine, and I have this book in Chinese with 3 Chinese wineries. And my kids love to correct, you did not do a book in Chinese. Your book was translated into Chinese. I was like, that's doing a book in Chinese. But anyhow, and it was, the idea is, how do I go to China without having to travel to every single city? And through this book, so a book can help you. And I think it sounds like you were probably trying to do the same thing. Can I get to all these people? You're one person.
Yeah, no, and you kind of remind me of a point too. Another big thing we wanted to stand for is like, how can you have a book about women but not see any women or people? So, there was another thing because, cocktail books can start to look the same beautiful, pretty photo. You're like, there's that cocktail. And we wanted to really, like we do, shake up what that experience was. We worked with an first time photographer for books, and we were really strong. We're like, Megan Rainwater, she's awesome. She understands community. And you open our book and the first shot is a crowd shot of people at this, what they may not know is a speed rack. And we talked to them what speed rack is. And you just see the energy of all the people in that room, like cheering and having the time of their lives. And you're like, what are they watching on stage? Little do they know it's a bartending competition. It looks like a rock concert. And that was the energy we wanted throughout the book. And it was really important for us to, as many of the women that we could get photographed making their cocktails or their hands involved, was to show that there are people behind these drinks and not have that feeling of a cold, like cocktail book that, oh, that's pretty, but maybe it'll make you stop and make you think and make you read the book in a different way. Like especially our champagne chapter, they're like, we need a graphic for champagne. I'm like, how about like our friend Chris Patino holding this woman's hand up and there's a champagne shower. I'm like, nothing says demystifying champagne for anyone in that moment. You're like, yeah, champagne, I need it for my party, and bring it to everyone in that way. So I think there's just ways to be disruptive. And again, if you stick to your passion and what you want to put out there, then that's when you get something that you're super proud of.
I'm just so in awe and enamored with listening to both of these incredible women speak. I do want to give the audience a moment to ask their questions. So I guess the final thing that I'll ask is, what do you hope for the future of wine and spirits, the beverage industry, especially for women and women of color?
I mean, I think we're doing it. It's having more of these kind of spaces to share our experiences. And, it's kind of full circle. I started in wine bars, went to cocktail bars, restaurants, where I came back to wine. I've always loved wine. Wine is actually, like cooking. Wine and cooking are the two things that I'm like so happy I'm not a professional necessarily in, because I actually want to just enjoy them. And really, I have a really lovely passion for and how they work in our world, because I think that's the most important thing. I think what we all missed, I always go back to the pandemic through us chefs. We missed going out to a place, going out to a space. Like all of us learned how to cook at home. I taught many, many people how to make cocktails at home. But then you're like, man, I just want to go someplace where I see the community, I hear the vibe, I hear a shaker going, the pop of the cork. And you're like, that's the stuff that makes our world beautiful, right? That idea of connecting through food and drink. And I want to see that. I think we're at a really interesting point of changing and shifting. The models are complicated. Business is hard right now. But I believe that this is going to actually make us stronger and make us a lot more efficient, a lot more sustainable, because all those things, when you think about it, making sustainability, efficiency, thinking about how we take care of our workers better, our restaurant workers, and provide actual living wages for them, and bringing them into the community of saying, you're a part of this whole process. That dish doesn't happen without a whole group of people, and making everyone work together. That's what I see for the future. And starting with rooms like this, where we get together and we have conversations against multidisciplinaries, that's going to start changing. And I think I always see the Latina community as a community that does this really well. And I hope that we can be an example to every group out there that feels like they want to motivate and build their community to make change. And we do that by supporting each other and celebrating our differences and what we all have together, and inviting allies in to work with us. So that's where I hope to see this community.
I love that. Laura?
Yeah, so I'm from Argentina, and one thing that Gabriela and I were talking about earlier is that in order to change the world or improve the situation for any group of people, you have to be able to have those difficult conversations. And in Argentina, everything is done through a joke. And nobody is politically correct, you guys. People I was with somebody and they were sharing their screen because we were looking, and then all of a sudden I read this, one of his emails popped up where he was being called gordito, like a little fat person. And that's the normal thing, like, hey, gordito, ¿cómo estás? And in Argentina, everything is solved through a joke. And I think that it's the hard on issues, soft on people. Like, if somebody completely disagrees with you or says something racist or sexist, try to laugh about it, be kind to that person. Most people are not trying to be awful, and have a discussion, an open discussion, so that person feels like they can go back to you and ask you a question. So I think part of the future for the Latina community, and for we're all in some group, in different groups in some way, is to like allow those difficult conversations and come to the table soft on people. And then the second advice I would give is follow the money. And this sounds crazy because when I started, I said, money is I was like, I don't care about money. I just want to have a beautiful job and help people. And, my dad, in fact, he has a PhD in economics. He said to me, Laurita, I do the money part. You just go and travel and sell and go do the tough negotiations, right? And I realized, if you don't understand, how you're making money, you can't do anything. So I think it's really important when you want to make a change in the world, figure out how somebody is going to pay for it. And I think that's often missing when one has a very idealist view, like I'm trying to preserve these genetically diverse vineyards in Argentina. And, my whole plan is, here's what I want to do, and then here's how I'm going to pay for it. And understanding that at some point you have to pay for things. I think that's really important, even if it's not very romantic or or something we like. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible job, ladies. Does the audience have any questions? Yeah, Nancy, we've got mics over there.
I do have a couple questions. It's a two-part question. So the first question is, being that there's a lot of expectations that we have to fulfill in our lives, whether it is in your career, in your personal life, with your family, how do you decide to choose a team that is going to help you so that you can delegate? I personally am having issues because I have so much going on, and I'm such a control freak that I don't want my identity and my messaging to be diluted if I do delegate to other people, whether it is my marketing, social media, or admin. I feel like I have to, be doing everything. So that's the first question. And the second question also, which is, again, money is such a taboo topic, but at the end of the day, if we don't get paid, like, how are we going to continue doing the good that we want to do in the world? Another thing that I'm also kind of fighting is having investors. Like, how do you choose the people that you want to work with to bring money in? Because I know that I'm so wildly capable of doing everything, but at the end of the day, I'm getting so burned out that I feel like that's going to defer me from continuing doing the work that I want to do, not just with my brand and my business, but the change that I want to do in the world. So it's a two-part question. So,
well, you can't fill cups from an empty well. So the burnout is real, and I get it. Trust me, I've been a business of one. For my personal, and giving up is really complicated, especially when there's things that for me, my persona on social is me, and that's really hard to be like, someone else can't be me. But you have to find the things that you can give up, right? So maybe you allow and find, start with baby steps. Start with someone who can at least give you an idea for content calendar, and then they give you some agency to be like, all right, you're going to fill in this, and then they'll help piece it together. I heard Baricia Lopez speak at the James Beard Women in Leadership, and she, what they did was her brother and her sister all got together, and they have someone come in, shoot content for them, and then they take it away and do it. So it's still them personally, and they have that calendar, so you won't lose a bit of who you are, but you're investing in someone else to do the labor-intensive thing. Someone else can make a video and a reel much quicker than you can, because you're gonna be like, oh, well, that little second here, there, and it's gonna be so much more time. So that's what you have to give up in order to, don't let perfect get in the way of that's good enough in that situation. So let go of those things that you don't have to be, because if you're going to be the CEO of this company, you can't be doing the admin, right? You can't be sitting there doing all your invoices. Find someone who can do that for you, and check the work. If you're a true control freak, have a schedule and be like, okay, cool, we're going to review all that, 1 hour on this day. But now you've taken that thing that take you probably 12 hours into 1 or 2 hours. So you have to kind of come to terms with yourself of those things. And then for investors, what I would say, I mean, this is a really hard one for us in the bar industry. Often, a lot of people want to put up money and give you something, but you're really not really an owner. So many of, our friends communally they're like, yeah, I own this bar. I'm like, do you? What do you have? Like less than 5%? So actually you don't actually have any say. You basically just bought yourself a job, and in 6 years you might get some money. So really look at what people want. Some of my smartest friends who are kind of investors ask for people more for money as an investment to give them a better percentage on their return, but without any real say in the business. So really look at what they want to take and try and find those people who are just willing to kind of angel invest, let you do their thing. They're going to get a better return on their money than they're going to get putting in other places. But there's a lot of people in our power. And for you, look into those Latin women funds. There's grants. There's lots of places that are willing to give you money. And that's where you should be spending that time that you're kind of like micromanaging and getting that.
Well, I can't comment on investors because my goal is to keep our family winery, in the family. And I've told all what we call the grandkids, like, I'm going to come from the grave if you sell this winery. So I'm making them all fall in love with it, and they are. Like, our next generation is so extraordinary, and they even the 12-year-olds smell wine. Like, they don't drink it, but they're fans. But back to the micromanage. Nobody good is not a micromanager, okay? So if you're obsessive and detail-oriented, that's amazing. Most doctors that I ever worked with have OCD, like severe, like they should be medicated. And that's why you're amazing. So be proud of that. So in terms of my strategy is two things. One is how I train people, and then the level of perfection that I expect from things and being very upfront about it. So how I train people, there's a saying at their winery, they're always like, Laura, now you have this favorite, like some people often complain, like I make it very open that people can criticize me. And it's not like I love it when they criticize me, but people know that they can come to me and that, if they have a good point, I like to get critique. And like the other day, my head of export, she's like, well, Laura, right now you have this favor. I'm like, what? Are you feeling left out? She's like, well, I'm like, so we have the conversation. Like, she felt comfortable saying like, why are you having this favorite? And what I try to explain to them is when a new person comes into my team, they are my favorite, not because I like them more, but because they need to be indoctrinated into my way of working. This is how you work with me. And so when I have a new person, like right now I have a new PR person. She's very junior. I'm like spending 20% of my time with her. That's a lot of my time. I'm like, I have a team of 700 people, and this is a very junior person. But she's doing something that's very important. And believe me, everything she does, half of it is completely wrong. So because she's new, she's brilliant. So every time I talk to her, I'm like, this is wrong, you need to ask me this. She set up a meeting for me today at 2 p.m. I'm not kidding you. I'm like, Saturday, like, who told her she could like schedule a Zoom at 2 p.m.? Like, how did this happen? But I sent her a nice email. I was like, in the future, don't set up Saturday meetings without asking me, but it doesn't matter. So she started, and I was like, listen, you're amazing. Like, after I tell her all of this is wrong, I'm like, however, I told you that, but you're amazing. I love that you did this and this and this and this. A+. And I tell her, the reason I'm telling you what's wrong is because in 3 months, I'm barely going to talk to you. I was like literally, I was like, because right now I'm training you. And she'll be like, great. And she sends me like, give me feedback. And so we started this, like from day one, they know the hard on issues, soft on people. Like, I congratulate, I criticize. And the arrows, remember the one with the arrows? It's like, teach people to be thick-skinned, but if you appreciate who they are, they will be thick-skinned. Now, if you say something like, you're so bossy, or you say something personal about them, well, then you're done. They will never listen to you again. So you have to be so careful to be soft on people. And then the second thing, you asked about, you're a perfectionist. And so I specifically tell my team, this is a B+ activity. So this is like, the A is getting it done on time. So many things, like you're not going to get an A on everything. So I told my dad, who's the economist, I'm like, Dad, I came up with this thing. I have the B- activities, I have the C activities, I have the A activities. He's like, oh, that's an economic theory. I was like, whatever. Like probably somebody won the Nobel Prize in economics for it or something. You know, I don't care. It works for me. So you have to tell your team that they can do something half-ass as long as I get it done on time. And you have to, when it's half-ass, you have to say, oh yeah, I would have loved this, but you did a great job because you did, you know, B-, whatever. Yeah, so decide those activities, communicate it to your team, and, you know, don't tell them they suck when they did what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. Takeaway for today, don't tell them they suck. We have time for one more quick question. Oh.
What's your sign?
I'm Virgo. Virgo.
There has been so much movement and unity within Latinas these last few years. One of my questions is, we've been kind of just really pushing this forward and a lot of women empowerment, but what is one thing that you see that may be a barrier today within our community, within Latinas, that we maybe you see in the future that may be a barrier or a struggle for this community?
I think we need to stop being so hard on each other. You know, like our community comes up with a lot of tough love, right? And I think there is this soft on people and having this idea that people, you know, some of us get to fail in private, some people fail in public. And that's really hard. And we're so hard on it. And I think it's kind of almost, it feels like that ingrained thing, you know, in our culture, like, oh, we got to like succeed. A lot of us are, you know, first generation, you know, our family came here to improve. So there's this idea of like, everything has to be perfect. It has to always be the A+. But I think if we're just a little kinder to each other and actually almost embrace more when people fail and bring them in and say, we see that, how can we help in the future? How can we all learn from that? Because, you know, like you said, you'll learn the most from the things that fail rather than things that succeed. And I think if all of us individually also share our struggles, things that are complicated, you know, I had an opportunity to really talk through a lot of really deep failures in the industry. And most people would be like, oh, but Lynette, we don't see you have failed at anything. And I'm like, no, I have. And I'm happy to talk to you about that. I'm like, that's why I talk about people. I'm like, listen, anyone's offering you ownership in a bar, really look at contracts, really deeply look at what those things mean before you sign. Read contracts. Everybody read contracts. And that's the stuff. So I think being able to be more vulnerable and put that out there and say, listen, if anyone wants to understand how I failed, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it or reach out. So we have to lift each other rather than tear each other down. And I think that's kind of gonna always be the positivity, because no matter what, every group in this world is pushed against each other, right? Because we're powerful if we all get along and help each other. We're not powerful if we're all infighting. And then they're like, great, now this group can't do anything because they're just fighting with each other and dealing with that. But when we come together and understand what's important for us as a community to uplift and what we bring, then no one can stop us, and they have to, you know, break down barriers for us to go over, because we march together to say, I don't care if I have a little, you know, whatever chisme with you, but we're going to keep going because what's more important is the unity and the impact and what we can all show.
Yeah, and what I would say is let other people outside our community celebrate you. I'll tell you a quick story. My son was in college, and we went out with him and it was one of those parents' day with a bunch of parents. And I have this woman who is came from mainland China, and her husband, they're both scientists. My son's a scientist, so all his friends were scientists. And this woman starts talking to me, and literally, she's Chinese, but she's Latina. She drinks only Malbec. She does Zumba. She talks like this. And she's like obsessed with Latin culture. And I'm sitting next to her, and I'm just like, I'm loving this woman. I'm thinking, oh my God, like if we can share our culture with other people the way, you know, this mom had embraced our culture. And, you know, like, as you can see, all these mentions of China, I'm also very fascinated by China because I sell wine there, and China's always in the news as something bad. And so, you know, I've taken but we sell a lot of wine there. So I've taken a lot of time to get to know people in China. I have, you know, one of my best friends in college is from Taiwan. We went there in our 20s and, you know, sort of went around with a backpack in China. But again, let other people celebrate us, share our culture, have friends from other communities that are very different, because I think Latin culture is so cool. And the more that our culture is celebrated, the more that we will be celebrated, and that we will do well as a community.
Well, mujeres, muchísimas gracias. Round of applause.
Yeah.